it's important to have them and to give back to them. And, you know, just seeing them when you have kids and so somebody goes up to a hospice, go see them. I mean, if it takes a day, spend the time, you know, and bring pictures, you know, and it's, so I get really misty about it. But anyway, I love doing the movie, and I'm not usually this big a baby.
Can I bother for just a second? We're gonna. If you'll share that microphone, because you can't hear their questions very well. I'm gonna give the audience to use this one. But I want to ask you the question. You play in the beginning of the film, obviously, a very crotchety man. You're the antithesis of that in life. How do you do it? What do you
didn't just
what do you draw
spend an hour
from?
and a half in the car with him.
Yeah, well, she decided not to have somebody pick us up, and she drove it. I mean, and she's worried about the cops pulling her over, and she said, "Oh, there's a cop." I said, "Well, then just pay attention." You know, and she said, well, I said, "Why didn't you take the ride?" She said, "Well, I thought it'd be nice." I said, "You know, nice? It took us, what, over an hour?" 2 hours, yeah.
But who's counting?
I am. But yeah, crochety's easy to play. I mean, I was around enough grumps, you know, uncles, you know, and I mean, I was not an honest, an angel as a kid, you know. I remember my grandmother used to raise German shepherds, and so I used to play with the dogs and everything. One day I wanted to go out, and she said, "No, you stay in now. You stay here." I said, "But it's nice. We just throw the ball out front." And she said, "No." He said, so I took her crutches, and I put them by the front door, and I went out. I played. The ball went out. I ran the street. A car screeched, and it just barely got me. And it kind of knocked me down. I didn't get hurt. I ran back in, took her the crutches. And I learned a good lesson then, you know. Don't mess with grandma. You know?
And raise your hand if you've got a question, because I'll come to you with the microphone. But I wanted to ask you, how did you find each other? Did you find this film? Did you specifically go after Seymour? What happened? How did that transpire?
I'm going to share your microphone.
Yeah, but she was working on Hollywood Boulevard. You know.
Damn near close after the fact, trying to keep this thing together. We actually were very blessed to have, obviously, a wonderful script. The writer, Michael Bruce Adams, is from Canada. He would have loved to be here. He sends his love. He's thrilled that we're here. And I read the script after he and I had talked about developing something together, and he was brilliant. And believe it or not, this was all in his head. He delivered the script to me in 3 weeks, and what you saw on screen was pretty close to first draft. He was that brilliant. And we got a casting director, as most people do in Hollywood, even though we had a really good idea of who we wanted. And one of our first submissions when we did our breakdowns with agents was we got a photograph, you know, submitted by Seymour's agent. And one of our other producers who isn't able to join us today, Susan R. Rogers, who is a brilliant low-budget indie film producer, she grabbed that picture and she said, "That's our guy. This is our guy." And from that moment forward, I was set on getting Seymour. Now, you know, you go around the bend and back. We had a different director on board at first, besides LeVar, who wanted somebody else, and then, you know, he wasn't working out. We got rid of that director, and then, you know, LeVar came on board, and he had other people in mind. And you know, it's always a give and a take, and you have to go through a process. But at the end of the day, Susan and myself stuck to our guns, and we said, no, we're not going to do this unless it's Seymour, and it worked out. So we're very grateful, because he's perfect for the part, obviously.
But she was never that nice to me when we were doing the movie.
Well,
Yes.
the producer answered my initial question, but it raised a new question. What was the script writer's inspiration for the story? There must have been something in his real life that prompted the story.
There was, and you know this.
Very moving story. His sister-in-law actually was passing with cancer and was in a care facility. And he said that when he found the line that Adrienne Barbeau delivers, that I can't find a soap that works on death, he said he had the kernel of the film in that moment. And that's one of those brilliant lines you can't even dream about, you know, but as a writer, he came up with it. He's very moved. His sister-in-law did pass, and his brother's raising two young, wonderful boys, and they're very proud to have this as, you know, the inspiration behind their mother and his sister-in-law's passing.
We all remember LeVar Burton as Kunta Kinte in Roots, but I didn't know that he directed. Is this his first direction?
Well, he's directed some television in I did Star Trek: The Next Generation. You know, I did one of those episodes.
Jordy.
And he worked on that quite a bit, you know. And he started directing. He directed some Las Vegas things with Jimmy Caan and things. And so I kind of knew him from being around. The thing about this script and what made it so important to me was that it called people's attention to you can't forget the people that were the sweetest to you, you know. And I didn't have a very close family. I was an only child. And now I got 8 grandkids, so I'm extremely lucky. But I had no brothers, no sisters, and I didn't know my father. So I had some uncles, supposedly they were called uncle, and, you know, they would see me and give me a nickel or something, you know, and I'd say, well, let me go with you. No, I'm going to a bar. And I said, well, I won't come in. I'll wait for you outside. You know, but you just, because you knew they liked you, you know, and when you grew up an only child, and I was on the road. My mother was in burlesque with Minsky's, so when I had to start school, I didn't want to do that. You know, and I'm in school. It was fun. I was going on stage when I was about 4, you know, and doing one show with the Baggy Pants Comics. So that was fun for me, and traveling by train, you know, from Penn Station to Baltimore, D.C., Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago, you know, it was paradise. Eating on the trains with the silverware and all that. But then I, you know, lived in Panama City. This script is, you can't help but relate to it. And my wife is having problems, you know, and so I have her in a place in Culver City, you know, and my daughter takes the little girls by to see her, you know, and my son takes his daughters by to see her. It's important to them because when they don't have the ability to get around that I do, you know, that you do as children, 10, 15, 20 minutes, it's nothing to spend with them, but it's everything to them. And I think the cast is great. I mean, Adrienne, she was wonderful. That scene where I'm in bed with her and she says, is that you? And I said, no, that's you, you know. And that, I think she just kind of laid there. She says, is that you? And I said, no, it's you. You know, and you get relationships working with good actors, and it was really fun to do that. Yes.